Okay, so I was supposed to have this video out like a day or two ago, but I've been really struggling with getting the footage that I took on my Switch off of my Switch and onto my computer, and I had to order something online to even be able to successfully get the footage off of my Switch or even take longer recordings than 30 seconds, so that's like no big deal, but I actually wanted to put my first impressions video out before I learned too much about the game, so I guess this is going to be kind of audio only. I'm going to put some footage up probably of other Legend of Zelda games that I do have footage of. So again, sorry about the lack of footage for Tears of the Kingdom, but soon I will have the means. Until then though, enjoy this first impressions video. Alright, welcome back to Honored Madman for a very special episode. Today we're not going to be talking lore, no, we're going to be talking about Legend of Zelda, because about like a day ago I picked up the new sequel to Breath of the Wild that everybody's playing. And as an occasional fly-by-night video game reviewer, I'd be remiss if I didn't share my thoughts about the game after playing around 8 to 10 hours of it, roughly. First off, I don't remember if it's how the last one started, but this game does not have a title screen, it just throws you right into the game. And look, spoilers for the first, couple hours of the game, at least. Ahead. You've been warned if you haven't played. I mean, if you're like me, you don't really care about early on spoilers, then, proceed. Okay, so this game presumably picks up shortly after the last game left off, and it starts with Link and Zelda exploring some crypts beneath Hyrule Castle because a new, more evil version of Malice from the previous game, now known as Gloom, has been spreading across the land like a plague, making people sick and draining their strength. It actually doesn't take very long for them to discover the source of all this gloom to be none other than the mummified corpse of an ancient Ganondorf, with what appears to be a severed arm grasping either at his neck or his shirt collar, I can't remember. It also appears to be clutching what I believe to be a Tear of the Kingdom in its hand. That's not really all that important now. Ganondorf wakes up and takes Link's arm and destroys the Master Sword, but not before draining Link of all 20 of his hearts, or not 20 of them, but 17 of them, starting us off at the classic 3. Jumping ahead, from there you wake up and you've been patched up, I guess would be the best way to describe it, by the Force Ghost of something that looks like it came straight out of Maiden Abyss. Except this guy seems like an alright sort. He gives you his arm and he suspiciously has the same name as the famous Sage of Light from Ocarina of Time, Rauru. But all of that's sort of not important here. I'll get into some lore videos eventually for this. Definitely once I have a better understanding of all of it. But what I have seen has definitely reignited my interest in wanting to make Legend of Zelda videos for sure. Now, the Force Ghost gives you his arm, and he basically guides you to these 3 shrines where you gain a different power from each one, similar to the other game where you had the 3 powers, magnesium, cryosis, and stasis, I believe was the other one, the one with the chains. It's been a while since I played Breath of the Wild. I honestly should have replayed it before this one came out, but this one kind of caught me by surprise, so maybe I'll end up playing it after I beat this one, and maybe that'll lead to some kind of comparison review. But anyway, I'm getting off subject. While you don't have access to the old powers from the previous game, at least right in the beginning of this one, the 3 new powers are all pretty useful, especially given how the world has changed. If you can believe it, weapons degrade even faster in this game than they did in Breath of the Wild. However, the one difference is, in this game you are given one nifty little ability that helps you circumvent that, at least a little bit. And no, you still can't repair weapons. But that doesn't mean that the weapon system itself hasn't vastly improved from the previous game, because it definitely has, and it's mainly due to the function of one of your new abilities, the almighty Fuse ability, that basically allows you to fuse anything to your weapon to sort of reinforce it and make it better. And since this is Breath of the Wild sequel, you can get really creative with this. I mean, the most common thing to do is to take a stick and add a bokoblin horn to it, or a moblin horn. But you could also grab a big tree branch and stick a spike ball on it. Now you've got a morning star. Lizalfo's horns make perfect buster sword blades. You can even fuse stuff to your shield to reinforce that, but as far as I know, you cannot fuse stuff to your bow, which kind of sucks, but it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it would kind of get obnoxious, I imagine. Although I do wish I could fuse stuff to my arrows, particularly the bomb plants, which I'm glad are in the game. Any reference to Wind Waker and I'm happy, which reminds me there is of course the Korok system that returns in this game, to the surprise of absolutely nobody. I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And just like the previous game, the Koroks are pretty easy to find, so it's not hard to up your inventory slots in this game either. So once I finally got to the surface, one of the first things I did was investigate the 4 major regions. I wanted to see the champions that I helped in the previous game. It turns out that every single region is now suffering from some type of supernatural disaster. The Doritos, as far as I could tell, were experiencing extreme winter, to the point that Hyrule has sort of organized a relief effort to bring them food because they're going to starve. Personally, I don't see why they don't just abandon the Rito village in that area and go to warmer climates. I mean, they're birds. Fly south for the winter. The once beautiful Zora's domain is now covered in mud. The Zoras sort of always get the raw end of the deal. I mean, look what happened to them in Twilight Princess. They all got frozen solid inside the domain. Perhaps the most interesting is what's become of the Gorons. There seems to be a bit of a red lyrium situation going on for Dragon Age 2 fans. And by that I mean, you know that red stuff that I mentioned earlier called gloom, it's sort of infected certain rocks. And these marbled rock roasts are being distributed amongst the Goron and even to Hylians, and this is all being done under the order of our good buddy Yunobo from the first game. Far from the timid little bitch that we saw in Breath of the Wild, he usurped the town from the previous leader and is now running a comically sinister mining company. Now, I'm on my way to go check out the Gerudos currently, but I wanted to pivot to another topic. One thing I've noticed more in this game is that you're going to encounter other travelers fighting monsters. I feel like I didn't see that very much, if at all, in the other game. I'm sure maybe it did happen. It's been a while since I played Breath of the Wild. And not only that, there's like instances where you'll be able to go into battle with a group full of admittedly ill-equipped soldiers, but it's still a lot of fun to run into the fight with a bunch of soldiers watching your back. And I also realized I kind of got off track and didn't explain the other special abilities that Link gets in this game. Now, I already explained how Fuse works, but what about Ultra Hand? Besides having an anime-sounding special move type of name, Ultra Hand is actually very fucking useful. First off, it allows you to levitate shit. You grab it with it in a similar way to how, like, magnesis worked, but then you can bond it to other inanimate objects and create like various things like bridges out of logs. You know, you can attach a balloon to a torch to like a little wooden platform and have a very, very makeshift hot air balloon. It really does make the possibilities of how you're going to circumvent any obstacle endless. Now, this is the part I'm really hoping I'm going to be able to get footage of, because it's much better to show rather than tell how these abilities work. But the other special ability is none other than Moody Blues from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5, Vento Oreo. No, but in all seriousness, it's actually a much better version of that stand. It allows you to physically rewind the trajectory of an object. So say a boulder comes rolling down at you and you stop it with the Moody Blues ability. Now at the point you activate it and stop it, it'll start going back the way it came, traveling the exact path it traveled to get to where it was. Again, there's a lot of possibilities to this power. I know these people who play Breath of the Wild, they got very, very creative with just the shit they were able to pull off with the stuff in that game. I can't imagine what we're going to be seeing in this game. Even now, there's probably a bunch of clips and videos of people doing ridiculously cool and hilarious shit using the mechanics that are built into this game. And that's why, honestly, I think Breath of the Wild was so fun. It's one of the Legend of Zeldas I haven't replayed as much as the others, like, you know, for example, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, that I played a million times. But there's just a certain beauty to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and just walking around with the slow piano music and the wind blowing the grass. Basically what I'm trying to say before I get too rambly is that these games have amazing fucking atmosphere. One thing I really liked was the addition of a bunch of new enemies. There's now boss bokoblins that lead hordes of smaller bokoblins. Now the boss ones, they're big and fat and they almost look like lesser Hinoxes, but they have both eyes, I believe. Not quite as tall as a moblin, but definitely wider. This game also followed the trend that Breath of the Wild did of bringing back obscure Legend of Zelda enemies. Breath of the Wild, for example, brought back the infamous Lionel, hands down one of the coolest enemies in that game. And this sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, followed that up with the return of none other than Gleeok, the three-headed dragon from the original Legend of Zelda and from Phantom Hourglass. And man, does his design look fucking great in this game. So in Phantom Hourglass, he had a Wind Waker sort of art style. And in the original Legend of Zelda, he sort of just looked like a three-headed dinosaur with wings. But in this game, man, there's like 3 or 4 different versions of the Gleeok, similar to how the Lionel was, with all the different maned Lionel. But I've seen a couple shock ones, and man, are they badass looking. I mean, I know Legend of Zelda brings back bosses all the time and technically reuses them. But it's really nice to see them brought back in this capacity where it fits so well. You know, 3-headed dragons running around fits so well into this setting. It's a missed opportunity to not have them. Oh yeah, there's also these funny looking enemies. They're yet another version of Blinn. I don't think we've seen them before, but they look a little bit like Ganon, sort of, Ganondorf, mixed with some type of monkey, and they crawl across the ceilings and swing at you with a stick with a rock at the end of it. They're very easy to take out, and they're known as the Horriblin, which is definitely an interesting Legend of Zelda sounding name. One of the other main points in this game, or at least that I can tell so far, besides solving all these regional catastrophes that are surely going to be solved by going into a dungeon and dealing with whatever evil's coming out of it. Besides that, the other thing everybody's trying to figure out is, where did Zelda go? There's been sightings of her dressed strangely and acting very weird all across the land. She never says anything and seems sort of menacing in a way. That leads me to believe that Ganon is either once again puppeteering Zelda around, or he's disguised himself as her, or perhaps he's straight up possessing her. No, I can't prove that, and I haven't seen her do anything outwardly evil. I'm sure there's some people that definitely have already beaten the game or got far enough to know the answer to this, especially with how this video's come out a bit later than I planned. I just wanted to get that baseless speculation out there, as I like to do. You guys know me. But I'm going to cut it off there because I don't want to talk too much without having the adequate footage to show what I'm talking about. At least when I'm literally like trying to describe and break it down. It just seems kind of, I don't know, I really thought I'd be able to get those clips off the Switch. Anyway though, I hope you guys found this video somewhat informative, so if you liked it, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me ramble on, usually to footage that matches what I'm rambling about, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. We have a lot of fun here. One thing I like is that everybody seems to get along in the comments, and that's a lot of fun. So as always, let me know what you guys think of this game if you've played it. Let me know what you think of my description of this game. If nothing else, if it sounds good to you guys. My first impression would be that I definitely think it's a very fun game and a worthy sequel to Breath of the Wild. I mean, I thought maybe it was just going to be like Breath of the Wild, but with a DLC altered map. And while it might seem like that at first glance, that is definitely not the case. Just like God of War Ragnarok, it expanded and built on everything that made the first game great, and is doing it on a bigger scale. I mean, there's the Sky Islands, which I didn't go into a whole lot of detail about. The phasing ability that lets you basically, if you're stuck in a cave, you look up using it and you can like phase through a whole mountain if it lets you, and it'll shoot you to the top of it. I kind of forgot to mention that in the rest of the video, but that's a really cool ability too. The game just has so much freedom with what you can do and how you can do it. You know, that's something I love about games like this. That's why I fell in love with Elder Scrolls Oblivion as a kid. Which reminds me, I started recording a video about my problem with Elder Scrolls lore. Now that doesn't mean I hate Elder Scrolls lore or think it's lesser lore or anything like that. I'm just going to explain what sort of made me stop loving it as much as I used to. Like, there was a lore development that I feel like sort of sucked and kind of ruined a lot of stuff, and I can ignore that, and that doesn't affect any of the lore from the games or any of the lore I love, and that works fine. So that lore, you know, that love of that lore is untouched. But yeah, I'm rambling again, so let's get to our outro. And look, my biggest complaint from the previous game was that I didn't like the weapon system very much. I thought it was interesting and unique, but not being able to repair or even craft my own weapons really sort of bugged me. And this game sort of fixed that. They did it in a very, let's just say, unexpected way, because we can craft weapons now with our fuse ability. You can take a stick and take a Lizalfos horn, and boom, you've got yourself a very badass sword. I think I already mentioned that earlier though, but as long as you loot every monster you kill, you'll never be without the means to make a very good weapon. You'll always really just be a fuse away from having a very useful weapon. Now, they're not all super durable, but even a big stick with a rock at the end of it works for a very long time in my experience. So yeah, I love the game so far. Stay tuned for the eventual lore videos, some type of story breakdown, and of course, a review. All the other projects are still coming too. The Radagon video will be out soon. The D video was supposed to be out like a day ago too, but I had like the whole Mother's Day thing, and you know, you guys know, who cares about personal life and all that? You guys know what I mean. But yeah, we're going to be back on track to having frequent videos again. As always though, I want you guys to be safe and have a good one. I'll see you next time.